folks. Hopefully it's working correctly this time. And things are actually showing up. There it is, now live. Okay. Restream changed their interface and it destroyed everything, right? Like it started streaming to an old stream setting that it saved for some reason instead of the one I had set up. So it was an ambient music stream. So you got to, those of you who are on Twitter, you got to enjoy about 10 minutes of live ambient music that I performed because I wanted to start a little early performing stuff leading up to 6:30. That didn't work out because of the technical issue, so I do apologize for that. I'm going to turn it down a little bit here. And actually, we'll turn it down here. This is actually what I just played because I recorded it in Ableton. It's just going around, and I can even add in some other stuff. But I did this live a minute ago, so. So we can have that going while we talk about energy. This is a silly, almost woo-woo thing to talk about. Looks like I have two here. I don't know what's going on. This is the actual one. So, unfortunately, because I use a restreaming software to manage this, probably nuked the audience for today, and I apologize for anybody that's over on the wrong stream here. Let's see if this one, maybe it's going on two streams at once. I can't even tell. So whichever one you're on, hopefully it'll show up on the chat. If not, I don't know. Look around here. Oh, it's on Zool too. That's why. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, whatever. It should all show up here. It should all show up here now. Okay. I'll link it. All right, there's the old stream. I'll link it up. Technology, it's like I had this whole idea. I'm like, I'm going to play some music. I'm going to transition into talking, and it's going to be cool. And that didn't really happen. It's okay. We'll roll with it. Here we go. Bring this down. I'm going to bring up another piece of music here, since I already did this. And we'll just we can actually fade this out. I can do it over here too. Check this out. Just fade these out. Just fade it out. This one going here. All right. Okay, so a little bit about energy. Energy, I'm thinking very broadly here. I remember I talked about 5 things that kind of create that go into being creative. One is inspiration. Inspiration is like the initial idea. There's also, there's effort, right? You have to do a thing. There is the valuation, deciding how that fits into the world and whether it's good or bad. There's the knowledge and the process that you put into it. There's a lot of things that go into creativity, but the main thing I kind of want to talk about today is just the energy that goes into creating a lot of the things that we do. There was an election yesterday, and it made me really remember 2016, because 2016 was this weird energy moment that I remember where like everything in the world started feeling positive leading up to the election in 2016. And reflecting on it, I think a lot of it had to do with there was this long, prolonged economic slump that persisted really through the entirety of the Obama administration, where things were getting worse every year in different ways. So, we had a big economic crash just as George Bush was leaving office. Because I was in the music business, this, like, Oh, there we go. There's the music. Sorry, I didn't have it on. Here you go. Got a little music here. Okay. Because I was in the music business, I felt everything downstream pretty profoundly in a way that most people may not understand or get, because they've never worked a job that required the economy to be booming in order to make money. And that's entertainment work. Contrary to probably what you learned in like your high school class about the Great Depression, entertainment is one of the first things that people cut out, but they cut it out in different ways, right? It's like, well, people still went to the movies. The movies were very cheap. So movies are a very cheap form of entertainment. Because I played a lot of gigs at things like restaurants and events, like art events and things like that, all of those things disappeared. So I went from playing 4 nights a week to playing 0 nights a week in about 2008. Where a significant portion of my income, which was performing, just disappeared almost overnight. So the venues that I played at, every venue that I played at in the years between the years 2004 and about 2007 closed. Every venue that I played at closed in some way. Now, some of them reopened, right? Like some of the clubs reopened later, but like the restaurants, the galleries, the places that hired me as a classical guitarist to play, they all closed down. So like my whole life disintegrated within a couple of months of Obama taking office. And it wasn't Obama's fault. Like this was something he inherited from the Bush administration. But Obamacare like nuked finances going forward. I used to spend $60 a month on health insurance. I spent $50 a month on gas and I commuted, right? Like it was really cheap to live in the 2000s and it went to being a lot more expensive. So by the time 2016 rolled around, I was spending like more than $20,000 a year for health insurance for my family, right? Of at that time 3, me, my wife, and my son. That included like $12,000 of compensation I got from my employer, and then I spent at least another $1,000 a month on top of that for health insurance. So things were really bad. The publishing industry was really bad. Like music industry was awful. It was bad. Like things were bad. But starting in 2016, you had this kind of energy. A lot of people started being more creative projects were coming out. And so like, where did that energy really come from? And the energy really came from a kind of confidence that you have. So the 5 things I talked about last week were inspiration, will, skill, effort, and valuation. For you to feel like you can be creative, you need to feel like your project matters, that it's possible to complete it, and that you will be able to complete it. That informs your will, your ability to do it. You have to have confidence in what you're doing. And so I look at some of the books that I wrote around that time, right? Like I wrote Water of Awakening in 2017 and released it in 2017. And a feedback thing I get a lot from this book is it seems like you had a lot of fun writing it. And I did. Like the energy was in this. Like I felt that I could do the project that I really wanted to in my heart. I felt that this project could succeed, that it could sell copies, like people would buy it. I felt that it would be really good. I felt that it would be something that would be worthwhile and last for a long time. And I still feel that about this book. I love this book. I loved writing this book. I would say the book that I'm currently writing on the Fantasy Live Write is probably the most fun I've had writing a book since I wrote this book. And it has a lot of things in common with this book, actually. So that energy went into a lot of what I was doing. It went into Needle Ash, which was another book I wrote. By 2018, a lot of that energy started to disappear, right? But these 2 books had that energy going for them. They were huge. And it made a big deal. It was a big deal for me. The energy that drove me to do it, that will to do it, was just a belief that I could do this. Like I can publish books and be a writer. And I think I quit my day job after that too. I could make projects that would be good, that would be able to be successful. And when you don't feel that, it's really hard to be motivated. If you don't feel like there's going to be any possibility of selling the book, if you don't feel like anyone's going to read it, which is why I tell a lot of people, especially for your early projects, they really need to be passion projects. You need to be passionate about what you're doing. It has to be an obsessive thing, because otherwise you won't get it done. You won't be able to finish that first book. You won't be able to get you won't be able to grab hold of that energy and be able to get to the end of the project and learn the lessons that you need to learn as somebody who's maybe new to the business. All of that stuff's really important. Recently, I've been feeling that energy, the muting of the energy here in 2024 and probably in the next couple months, really had to do with a lot of fear that 2020 was going to happen again. That people were going to experience that big letdown. I wrote books in 2020, like leading up to it, and I just held off on them. One of them was Ultrafalta. It's over here, right? So I wrote this book in 2020, and I didn't release it. And the main reason I didn't release it was I lost confidence in people's desire to read something like this. It's a tragedy. It's a fantasy book, but it's a tragedy. I just felt like people weren't going to want that after 2020. 2020 was such a downer year. Even if you were on the other side politically, it was a huge downer year. They had the pandemic, people were locked up, everybody felt really down. I needed something more like Water of Awakening to be an escapist piece of fiction, but that's what I was passionate about writing at the time, was this. So I just held off onto it for like 2 years and released it, I think, in 2022. And I knew it wasn't going to be super popular because it's weird, and that's okay. That's one of the cool things about what I do. And I can release things that I don't think are going to be hyper popular just because I'm passionate about them. But having that energy, that feeling like I can do this, if you don't have that, it's really hard to get the thing done. So I didn't want to go through with these streams talking about each thing in order. Like, let's talk about inspiration first. But like, especially with the election and how people felt about it, energy is really just as important. All of these things happen at once. Inspiration, will, effort. If you don't have the will, you can't have the effort. Where does the will come from? The will comes from the belief that you can do it. The belief that you'll be able to complete the project. The belief that it'll be good. The belief that your ideas and your inspiration matter. And now a little bit of that is valuation as well, right? This will be valuable. It's good. These things about it are good. That tends to come a little bit with the confidence, right? And the will to do it. All these things are bound together. So when I look at 2024, I feel like there's a definite turn in energy. I felt like that happened last year. I know this sounds like woo-woo, but it's just sort of the collective way that people talk to each other, the way that they interact online, the way that you meet people, and they have a positive, forward, outward energy towards you. The big one is masks coming off. I felt it coming to Texas, right? In California, as soon as people started losing the masks, because I lived in a conservative part of California, immediately everybody's morale went up because we felt like we were just rebelling against bullshit. And when I came here, any person that had a mask on automatically had a collapsed energy state. They didn't talk. They weren't outgoing. They looked like they were just in terrible fear of failing at something constantly. Whereas everybody else was just bright, happy, strong energy, belief in the future. And all of that, despite all of the bad things that have happened over 4 years, the rampant inflation, massive costs going through the roof, suppression of liberties, right? Like problems with the businesses. Our businesses have definitely suffered over the last 4 years. And so it's hard to keep that motivation, that will forward, that will high, where you're like, I'm going to do this and it's going to matter and it's going to be successful. When, like, for instance, the audiobook market just collapsed. People are like, why don't you do more audiobooks? Well, they're not really worth it, right? They're not a great investment of my time because the market was so bad. But now I look at it and I'm like, that audiobook market could recover. It could recover bigly, The only market that I'm not having a lot of confidence in, well, I don't have a lot of confidence in the publishing business, but that's because of like problems with Amazon. Those could get fixed. We don't know. But the gaming industry feels like it is stuck in like a depressive spiral. Like everybody who works in the industry seems really depressed, low energy, low confidence. I feel like the failure of Concord was like a pivotal moment in the energy state of the games industry, where 8 years of effort just collapses into a singularity and gets taken off the market. Just people aren't interested. And then what do you do with that studio? You have to close it down because there's just no confidence that they'll be able to do anything else again, right? Dragon Age Veilguard came out after being, it was called like Wolf Age, or I don't know what else it was called, Dreadwolf or something at one point. Massive retooling, reworking of the game, and it just putters out as a low confidence, hyper political struggle session. That's 2020 through 2024. That's the collapse of the energy. Just low confidence, low valuation, no belief in what you're doing, no grand scheme that you're really pointing towards. No feeling that like you're grasping for the divine or you're grasping for something great. It's just phone it in, by the numbers slop. I felt like the most, even big stuff like Final Fantasy 16 has felt a little bit just not as aspirational as past games were. Final Fantasy 15 was very aspirational. Final Fantasy 13 was very aspirational. Final Fantasy 16 felt just a little bit... It was a good game. It was definitely a good game and really well made, but it just felt like it was not reaching for the stars. It was encapsulating the downer moments of the Biden administration. And I think that's why a lot of the polls were wrong, believe it or not. I don't think the polls are particularly scientific. I think the pollsters are just sort of giving their vibe. And because they're in a little bubble, they're in like a little liberal bubble, they don't feel the energy of the rest of the country being very positive and moving forward. And then they interpret when things are winning, their energy collapses. They have no positive momentum. They have no positive feeling about it, right? When it's like, this is actually, and the fact that Kamala has like conceded the election and said, we're going to like peacefully transition. We're not going to try to stop Trump like we did before. It's like their whole structure collapsed and it's just replaced with like a massive positive energy. That I think will get a lot of people motivated to do things, believe it or not. Everyone, even people who hate Donald Trump, are going to get caught up in the wave. You know, they'll get caught up with the tide and kind of push to do new things in the next couple of years. I think the energy lost. I think we lost something around 2018. It felt like with not just like midterms, but the Trump presidency, Trump the egregore, Trump the primal. We summoned Trump as a primal into the world, and he didn't do quite what people wanted him to do, right? People summoned him forth as this positive energy. I think some people wanted him to be a dictator, and he just didn't do that. He was just a really standard politician, kind of governing with the people that were there in the Republican and Democrat establishments, and not really rocking the boat at all. And I think people just kind of leveled out, you know. They came down off the mountain, as I like to say. Came down off the mountain, you know. Come on, Tar says, polls are uniquely tough with Trump specifically. I do hear some were pretty close this season, though, within 2 points. Yeah, some were. A lot of them weren't. But yeah, the polls are never accurate. They're too small a sample. People have gone over that. Like, people who are right-wing just never really will answer pollsters. They're too busy, or they don't trust them, or, you know, things like that. Yeah, word working right now, always nice when you're live. Thank you. Like, I love doing craft projects and stuff like that too. So yeah. I think the pollsters, for the most part, and like you saw all the predictions were just a wishful thought. It's like Kamala's going to get 350 electoral votes and she's going to crush him, and Trump won the popular and the electoral votes. Of course, there's 20 million Democrat votes missing from 2020, which will raise a whole another set of concerns as we go forward. But, you know, that's the way it was. Like, the energy of the Democrat machine just collapsed in the final stretches. And people were just wishing that it wasn't that way. They were just in their bubble, not feeling that the tide was turning against them. You know, all the super high IQ people were either going neutral or jumping behind Trump. Why was that happening? Well, Trump ran on the issues, believe it or not. That's another thing. I don't want to get too political because this is a creativity stream. But, you know, he ran on the issues and got people inspired. And Trump is an energetic person. He's a person that gets other people around him to move and feel and go forward. And you had so many of these moments. There were 2 assassination attempts. There were the McDonald's moment. People wanted to poo-poo that, but that was like a big energy moment. It inspired people to think about how he relates to common people. They watched him talk to a fry cook and listen to a fry cook and do what the fry cook told him to do. And so that moment there, if you just watched it, it's like, this is not a person pretending. This is a person who's like, I'm going to listen to you. How do you cook these fries? This is like your job that you do. And one of the things that you get with Trump is like, somebody did this on Reddit. People who've actually dealt with Trump as an employee. What was he like? And everyone was hoping that there was going to be this thing like he was awful. It's like, no, 100% of people were like, Trump was great to work for, super kind to me, very down to earth, took time to talk to me, absolutely a great person to work for, to work with, just a great guy to deal with. People picked up on that. And I think the Joe Rogan podcasts were huge. The Joe Rogan podcasts just showed Trump being a human being. You can't be anything other than yourself and talk off script for 3 hours, which is what Trump can do. I think there's a reason Kamala Harris didn't go on that, is that she would have had to ad lib. She would have had to be herself, and they just didn't know what to deal with that. Right? They were too used to running a carefully managed media campaign where everything's about small sound bites and little pieces like that, rather than a general energy to it. And Trump went on with Rogan and was just a human being for 3 hours, and it was like a really good humanizing moment. I also watched the one with John Fetterman, and even though Rogan grilled him a little bit, whoops, that shouldn't be on. What's that doing? Oh, I hit like the record button. I have like a record pedal that hooks into Ableton, so it's kind of cool. He got his no tax on tips policy idea from talking to a waitress. Hardwick says this. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Like, he talks to people. So even though he's a billionaire, he's not some aloof elite. People interpret that. People pick up on his vibe. They pick up on his energy. Anyway, I was talking about John Fetterman. Like, it was a really humanizing moment because Rogan really treated him like just a normal person, not like a disabled person. He was gentle with the guy's disabilities because he had a stroke and his auditory processing is not, it's not there because of that stroke, which can happen. It's one of the things that can happen. And then JD Vance was just mostly really on point with all the issues. Really sharp guy. So I think that made a big difference. People felt that energy. I don't know how many people changed their mind in the last week, but it was clearly enough. Enough people either changed their mind about voting in general, like they got energized to go vote, or they switched camps. They said, I'm not going to vote for this person who didn't show up to primaries and stuff like that. I think that's why they stole the primary too, is that they would have known that there just wasn't the energy behind her. Like, you feel it when politicians get on stage and they start interacting. There's an energy to Trump that just like squashes everyone else. Even someone like Ron DeSantis, who's a very high energy guy, will get squashed by Trump. Trump at 78 years old has more psychic energy pushing in every direction than anyone else in the field really has. And you could feel it. And so when you see that pony run in the race that only he can run, you feel energized to do it. You feel inspired to do it. You feel like, I can be successful too. Not only that, but the future is going to be good. Things are going to change for the better. And I want to get in on that change. I feel like because things are going to change for the better, I can complete a project. I can do something new and original. I could take a big risk. I can start a new business. When you feel like things are going to get worse in the future, you hold back. You hold on to what you have. You get risk averse when the market's down, and when the market's going up, that's when you start betting big. This seems like the opposite of what people would logically think. Like, when the market's down, that's when you buy. But the people who make money in the markets never do that. They buy on the up, but they don't buy it. They're not trying to buy at the bottom. They're really not trying. They're only buying when they see forward motion. And it's like when they're on a roll, they start to add more money into it. Not when they're not like, okay, I think the market's hit bottom, I'm gonna buy stuff. No, you buy on on the slope up. And so I feel that way about a lot of creative stuff. I expect for a lot of my mutuals, I expect big things over the next year. I don't know what I'm going to do. Right now, my contemplation for like what 2025 is going to be, I have a couple books that I need to get out. I have a big back catalog of books I've written that I haven't really published, one of which you can actually get on Patreon. So let me link that. Where's the Patreon? I'm going to link that in chat for, hopefully the chat is working. So, yes, you get Bright Children, which was only on Kindle Vela. It was an experimental Kindle Vela book. Not really. I actually wrote it in like 2016 is when I think I wrote it. I think I wrote it in 2016. I had a lot of energy behind it. But I kind of held off on publishing it because I wanted to write the other books in the series as like part 1. And so I don't want to release a part 1 without like part 2, 3, like really on the way. But if you're on Patreon, you can get a glimpse of that. It's a really cool story where there's no sun. It's like fantasy story without sun. You have to live in a world of darkness with magic. You know, kind of like the Underdark, but the whole world is darkness. So if you liked something like those early Drizzt Do'Urden books by R.A. Salvatore, this might be your speed, with a little more mythological stuff behind it, you know. So anyway, that's the big thing, is that the energy. And so when people feel that, I think even the people who are on the other side will start to feel that there's a positive energy, like they can do something big. They'll just get kind of caught up in the tide with it. By the way, there is a piece of advice from Stephen King that I often think about, which is that he says you should write a book in a single season. Right? So he writes a lot of books. Why a single season? I've experienced this myself, is that you will actually lose confidence. You'll lose confidence in what you're doing if you take too long to finish a book, or perhaps too long to publish it. I noticed this with King Leper, because I wrote King Leper, and then I stopped writing it to write Al Shafalda, which ties into it. So if you liked this, it's a big tie-in with King Leper. And I just kept holding off on it. You know, you just lose confidence in the story. You don't feel motivated to write on it. And I started doing a bunch of other projects and barely coming back to it till I like force myself to finish it. And I still haven't released it because I'm like, this is a different kind of story. You know, how do I feel about it? If I had just written it and published it in 2020, I think I would feel a lot better about the book. Like, I wrote the book pretty much in 2020 and just held on to it. Yeah. Dancing Godzilla. When I'm 78 years old, I want Trump energy. Yeah. I don't know how he does it, but I think he's just really motivated. His willpower is really high. As far as that those 5 areas of creativity, his willpower is very high. He has skill, but it's his will to do it. Like, no, I can't think of anybody else who would deal with the fallout of 2020 and be able to come back and win big 4 years later, and become the second president ever to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, while being actively prosecuted by a corrupt regime, right? While dealing with all of that other stuff. Like, they were trying to lock him up. And he managed to come back. It's like the biggest comeback in political history. How can anybody expect her to negotiate with Putin, Z, or Kim if she can't even do a Stoner Bro podcast? Yeah, it's an energy thing, right? She's low energy. Dracula took Bram Stoker about 7 years to write. I haven't heard this. You know, it took Tolkien quite a bit of time to write some of his books because he would put off writing them and he had to type them up himself, and a lot of things that go into that. So sometimes it could take a long time to write a book, and I think he could suffer for that. But with Stephen King, I think it's a really good piece of advice. You want to, when you are energized and excited to do the project and you believe in it, that's when you want to do it. That's when you want to actually do it. Kill your darlings later, but like, you want to complete the first draft in a season if possible. You want to harness that creative willpower while it's there, because it fades. And your motivation to work, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. That's also why in my creativity book, Keys to Prolific Creativity, which I don't know where it is. I need to just have it here so I can just whip it out and buy this book. No, that's not it. Right here it is. Is this it? Boom. Keys to prolific creativity. Work every day. Okay? If you can habitualize working every day, then these ups and downs with the will, power, you're going to be able to overcome them, right? So you keep the effort constant. Keep the effort part constant. Inspiration's going to come and go. Inspiration will explode and hit you, and then it'll fade. And then you'll have nothing, right? You won't feel energized to work sometimes. Habitualize the effort. That's where the creativity is going to come from. And you'll find the more you habitualize sitting down to write, sitting down to practice your instrument, sitting down to do these things, the more you habitualize them, the quicker you get into that creative space to where you are being inspired, where you have the will, you have the confidence to complete it. You're also going to be building skills very consistently. That's a big one. You want to build consistent skills as you're working. Now, you don't want to just think that it's all magic, right? You're going to build skills from this. Now, let me get I realize I don't have my fill light on, so I don't look quite as beautiful as I ought to look. Put on my hat. Yeah. So keep the effort constant, and the other stuff you'll find will come with it. The valuation, figuring out like who's going to want to read this and is it any good. The more time you spend away from your manuscript, the less you're going to be able to accurately know what's in it, the more disconnected you'll be from it when it's time to sit down and write and actually create the story and do what's supposed to be done for it. So I recommend you keep your effort constant. Some people have different methods, and I talk about those in the book. So when they get really inspired, they do like a sprint. They go all in and just explode with the energy for whatever they're trying to do. Where they have the inspiration, they have the will, that's where they're going to maximize their effort, is during those points. But kind of like with exercise, I've just learned that those things are subject to cycles. I've been productive for the last 4 years, and it's not like I felt like super energized about the future of the world or the publishing industry or the music industry or anything like that. It's just habitualizing the effort. It's just like going to the gym, right? If you only go to the gym when you feel like it, you'll probably never feel like it, because when you do go, you'll feel bad afterwards. But if you habitualize going to the gym, if you just do it for 30 days, not only will you be in better shape, but you'll be more energized to go to the gym. You'll feel better about going to it, because when you go to the gym and you do a good workout, you won't feel like completely destroyed the next day. You'll feel good and energized by it. So it's one of those things. And I thought about that this week, because I just really didn't feel like working out at all this week. But I knew that like once I got in there and I warmed up and I started putting in the effort, that I was going to be glad that I did it. And that was true. I'm really sore. And today's leg day, guys. It's leg day. Yesterday was the election. You might feel good about that. Today's leg day. The work starts. You got to work hard. We could talk a little bit about something. I really want to focus on this idea of energy, but you could talk about something else when it comes to because I'm seeing people talk about, my mom doesn't like Trump or this or that, how people are conditioned to react to certain things. Because our emotional state, you never want to hand your emotional state over to anybody, if possible, right? It's impossible to avoid having your emotional state in the control of other people to some extent, because you love other people and you care about what they think about you, and you care about the relationship you have with them. So obviously I'm married. My emotional state is subject to my wife always. Like, she could harm me emotionally if she wanted to. We don't do that, right? But instead try to lift each other up as best we can. But your emotional state is subject to other people's actions. But you want to limit that. You really want to limit that to the people who are real in your life. And if they're people who are always trying to destroy your emotional state, just cut them off from that access. Refuse them access to bring down your emotional state. And that includes the media. Some people get really excited about a big event, right? I could feel the energy. It's a lot like 2016, not quite, but it's muted. For me, it's muted because I'm a little bit more laid back about it. I'm a little bit more cautious about this sort of thing. And because I'm really consistent about my work habits, that uptick doesn't upset me as well as the downticks. So if something bad happens, it's not going to make me unable to work. But there's people who's like, I can't come into work today because Trump lost the election. I remember people being very upset that Barack Obama won an election in 2008. And like everybody went to work the next day. I remember I had a friend that's like, the Republic has fallen. I'm like, okay. We went to work the next day. I went to work. Man, you can't skip leg day and think, cardio does work your legs, but you're not getting progressive overload from cardio with your legs. There are things you could do that will like definitely work your legs. I do a lot of incline walking and backwards incline. Backwards incline is really good. Running backwards on an incline, you'll feel sore if you're not used to that. But then your body gets used to it. So how do you keep building muscle? Well, you got to progressive overload. You got to hit the weights. I don't hit leg day as much as like other parts because I'm always using my legs constantly. I'm on my feet all day long. I try to put it on a day where like I can be okay with it the next day. Like I went to the Ren Fair on Sunday. I wasn't going to do legs on Saturday. Like walking 10 miles. Oh man, it would have been brutal. Split squats. That's what I like to do. So I do, I don't have like a really strict leg routine, but the big ones I like are like a Smith squat, and then like a dumbbell deadlift. Get 100-pound dumbbells and then do a high rep deadlift with those because you're not having to worry about your spinal position and how the bar is going. Your shoulder is always in line with your feet, so it's really easy on the joints. You're never worried about like hurting your back from going over with too much weights. In fact, I would get even bigger dumbbells. I'd get 250-pound dumbbells to do those with if I was really wanting to work it hard, and that would be a really good exercise for me to do because it would my legs are weird, right? Some people, their femur to shin bone ratio is not quite right, and I'm one of those people. I'm pretty tall, and my femurs are slightly too long for my shin bones, and so it makes like deadlifts a little awkward. Like it's still deadlift, but it just makes it awkward. So doing dumbbell deadlifts, or you could do a hex bar or something like that, where you're standing in the middle and the weight is just lined up, starting with your ankles and just going up to your hips. That really is good. It's you find you're very strong with that position too. So that's what I like to do. Do you outline all your stories? I do. I don't outline them as much as other people outline theirs. Some people go scene by scene. They write a summary of every scene that they're going to write. And that's great if that's you. If you like to be hyper detailed and really have a great plan before you start drafting, totally recommend it because it will eliminate writer's block. Writer's block usually happens because you don't know what happens next and you can't think of what the next thing to happen is supposed to be. Well, if you outline your stories, it gets rid of that. For me, I just write an event sequence. This happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And it gains detail as I go. So as I'm deeper in the book, I might go, okay, the next scenes are this and that because these next things are going to happen next. And then I just write them. And so I will pants write the scene level, right? I don't write a hyper detailed outline for a scene. I just go, oh, I know what is going to happen. I have an idea of who I'm working on with this, like what relationship I'm going to be doing with in this scene, and I just do that. J.K. Rowling had a great outlining technique for the Harry Potter books. I believe that's why they were so successful. She had a list of things that were going to happen in the book, and then she would know what order. This is going to be this relationship, and this is going to be this event, and this is going to be this relationship with this character. So it's all based on Harry's relationships with other characters. Harry with Snape, Harry with Dumbledore, Harry with Hermione and Ron, Harry with Ron and Hermione, right? Harry with Malfoy. So each scene had this relationship aspect, and I think it really made the books really successful. You felt so much character tension throughout the stories that any kind of lull in the plot you wouldn't even notice because there's some other kind of piece of story tension asking you to turn the page. I get writer's block while outlining because I have a hard time figuring out where the story should go. That's the time to get it. before you start writing prose, that's the time to get writer's block, is when you're outlining, because that's just less work. And it's easier to fix early stuff in your outline than it is to write 50,000 words and then go, oh, I got to rewrite chapter 2 because I got to change something, Do you have any advice on writing fantasy races? Absolutely. Tons of advice. Okay. What's the purpose of the fantasy race? So you ask yourself that question. What's the purpose of the fantasy race? Why do you want to have a fantasy race, and why is it there? Usually fantasy races serve to be some kind of reflection of humanity. Orcs are savages. If we look at savage orcs, they're intended to be a savage demi-human, right? They are human in essence, but they have a wholly savage approach, right? If you make a reptilian humanoid fantasy race, how is that going to be different, and what are you emphasizing with that? Maybe they're more calculating, maybe, things like that. You want something that's alien. So do you want something that's really alien? Do you want it to reflect humanity? That's going to determine how you're going to write the fantasy race. Do you want to write something that's really different? And then what purpose is that going to serve in your stories, right? So the elves in my stories are really like the golden man. They're really a golden man. And so that means they're like a better version of humanity, in the sense that they're less mortal, they're more immortal, they have access to magic, they're more in tune with creation and the creator, they are closer to the gods, they're more like the gods, and they're more like God, they're more like the creator. So humans, meanwhile, are dim, like they don't have magic, they are less understanding of the world. Things like that. So, different races can serve different purposes. So once you answer that, then you can think about the aspects of that race. If you imagine a bug race, okay, bug races are going to be really alien. What would intelligent bugs, how would they organize their society? Well, you might use ants as a model. There might be like some workers, there might be a queen. And so you do deal with it like that. How would their culture respond to outsiders, given their societal organization, the way that they reproduce, and you just sketch it out from there. And then the real question that you have to ask is like, what's the purpose of this in the story? My heroes are going to meet this bug race, and they're going to be really scared of the bug race, but it turns out the bug race is actually pretty good, but it doesn't understand them, and people want to kill the bug race because they're afraid of it, but the bug race, you can figure out how it's going to fit into your story. Versus being something alien just for the sake of it being alien. Being alien so that people can try to learn to interact with something. It's like the bugs in Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead. That's really about looking at the alien thing and being able to have compassion and understanding for something that's really different from you. The main thing is you have to think about what the purpose of the race is in the stories. Do you have a specific purpose for it, or are you just wanting to have a D&D style bunch of alien races? I think a lot of people write a lot of D&D inspired fantasy with races, not thinking that those races exist for gameplay purposes. They're there for gameplay. Kobolds act the way that they are for gameplay purposes, and half-orcs are the way they are for gameplay purposes, and the story kind of emerges out of the gameplay, at least if you're playing classic D&D. So they start writing books that have like orcs, and like, well, what's special about the orcs? How are the orcs different from people? Why are they different? How is dealing with orcs going to be a different thing? They tend to just write green humans, or like modern D&D, it's like they're just Hispanic people. They're orcs or Mexicans, They have tieflings. Why do tieflings matter? Well, it used to be, they're devilish and that kind of thing. Evil races, I always think that's stupid, because like the point of orcs is to be evil. The point is to have a monstrous, evil, intelligent force to deal with. That's the story purpose behind orcs. The idea that orcs are somehow Africans is completely stupid. That it doesn't function that way, and it's not supposed to be that way. That's purely the racist mind seeing like, oh, well, they're horrible savages who eat babies, so they're obviously African coded. It's like, I think you might be a little racist there. Anyway, when I wrote and finished the first draft of my one novel, I had great success writing chapter summaries as my outline. Little paragraph of what I wanted to happen and a line about the theme. Yeah, that's an excellent way of doing it. And that's more or less what I do. I don't necessarily do with the theme. Well, I do with the theme. Like, there's a goal. There's something that's going to happen, and that's going to be part of it. Helps to not make a fantasy race a one-to-one stand-in for real-life groups, too. Otherwise, what's the point of making it a fantasy race? Well, that's what they do with it now. They just make it... They're just people. They're not special or different. They don't have a different culture. They don't have a different intellectual capacity. They don't act any differently from people. Because like evil races are bad. Why? Because then you'll think certain human races are evil. It's like that doesn't follow, right? The bug people are evil because they want to eat you. They view you as food, right? There's no human race that views people as food other than like, cannibals out in New Guinea, and it's not that simple, right? Or like the Aztecs. The Aztecs engaged in cannibalism to appease their evil gods, not to, not because they needed the food. So yeah, I would like my favorite. If I'm going to look at a writer, let's look outside of D&D, and I'm going to give you a writer. It's Steven Erikson. He wrote Malazan Book of the Fallen, and in the Malazan books, there's a lot of different fantasy races, and they're all really different, and they have different mythological origins that propel them along different paths to do different things. Some are really scary. There's like a dinosaur race called I'm trying to remember them. There's the Kachane Chamale, which I think are like an ancient weirder race with more like joints on their hands, and they're pretty much immortal, and they're super powerful. So I don't know how they went away, but they were pretty big. The other one was but then there's the Tiste races. There's like the Tiste Andi, which are like the darkness elves, and the Tiste Leosin, which are like the lightness elves, and then there's like shadow elves, like the mixture of those two. There's humans. There's like humans that ride bugs. There's some other kind of similar humanoid races. So they're all a different thing, but they're kind of magic attuned. So it has to do with the history, like the ancient history. Oh, there's the, who are the ones? The undead race. The ancient, like, caveman undead people. Drawing a blank on them. They're the bone casters. What were they? The Talanamas. So you have some really unique races. If you were to look at them, they're almost like World of Warcraft. You basically have night elves and you have undead, right? But they're a little bit more involved, a little bit less human than what you think. Some of them are really inhuman. They're dinosaurs. There's like a dinosaur race that's like extinct, in addition to like the elf races. It's pretty cool stuff. Pantsers don't outline well, yeah. Yeah, my outline style is just an event sequence. This happens. It's like a treatment. It's more like what a George Lucas would do. He'd do a 2 to 5 page treatment on what the screenplay was going to be, and then he'd hand it to a screenwriter to start doing drafts, and then he would edit the drafts and that kind of stuff. So I do kind of a treatment to start a story, and then I just go through the treatment. And if I want to change something, if I come up with new ideas while I'm writing, and then I just do that. I just follow that inspiration. My writing style leaves me open to new ideas and new inspiration while I'm writing the book, and I often do that. I know for Eyes in the Walls, I came up with the double ending while I was writing the book, and I was like, oh, this would be big. Can I do this? And I did it. I weaved in all the little details so that you could get the double ending of that book, of Eyes in the Walls, which people really like, It's useful to differentiate between race and species. I think so, but you have to keep in mind that a lot of them crossbreed in fantasy. Like this guy's half orc or half elf, right? That's a D&D thing, which means they're all really humans or sort of versions of humans that kind of mix with each other, half dwarves, whatever you want them to be. Tolkien had, several races, and I think a lot of people have been inspired by the way that he did races. The orcs are basically an evil race, the trolls are an evil race, the Ents are weird tree people, right? You just kind of the different versions of what we are, for the most part. I think that was an explanation for how the orcs began too. Was it started off as like tortured elves, right? You could look at something like Elder Scrolls, which there's really no half-breeds in Elder Scrolls. And I think that's just because that would be a lot to make extra art for. Is like, this guy's half dark elf, this guy's half whatever. But there is a race in there. The Bretons have mixed heritage. They're half elf. They're half elves basically. They're half elf, half human. So that's Bretons, right? And then there's high elves, and each of them has a gameplay purpose. The high elves are like this, and their culture's like this, but that makes them play like this. Wood elves are like this, and they have these powers. So it's all gameplay that drives those races. So when we're thinking about fantasy races, I think it's really important to think about what you just want to do with them. Like, are they there? Why are they there? I think a lot of people get inspired by RPGs without realizing that a lot of things that exist in RPGs are there for the purpose of the gameplay and not for a story purpose. So you have to think about why this story exists. So, like, if I have the Dryson in my books, which are kind of orcs, they have a weird, different culture. They worship different gods. They have a different idea of immortality, of the afterlife. Their religion is very different. So they serve as just a different culture, but they're fundamentally like people, right? They're not very alien. There's some beast people that I haven't really brought into the books yet, but like, the Dryson are not really alien. And in fact, as you get deeper in the mythology, you realize they are humans. Like, everybody's humans. Just some are more fallen, and some have been twisted in different ways by the fall of man. Whereas, the Iron Man, which is kind of more like us, the humans, they are very fallen, and they don't have a lot of access to magic. Elves are closer to the creator. Dryson worship Satan, basically, and so they're all reflections of what they want in life. So the Dryson are big and powerful, and engage in gross rituals in order to gain things from dark deities. They're like the darkest. They're kind of inspired by Aztecs in a way, but really my own imagination for that. Spock, you want to know something? Everybody's human. Yeah, and he'd say, some would find that insulting. Yeah. Do you have any advice on writing mythologies for fantasy races? So I told you about mine, which is really a reflection of the descent of man, the fall of man. Children inherit their mother's race according to Elder Scrolls lore. I think they did that in Dragon Age. If a human and an elf have a child, it's always a human. Somehow. Yeah, the Talanimas. That's a cool one. It's misuse of energy to naively rush forward with borrowed idea without trying to understand the reason why it's implemented. Yeah. I mean, you can borrow races and have orcs, whatever, bugbears. What are you going to do with them? Like, why are they in your story? That's the bigger question. It's like, I think everything should fit the story, the geography, the cultures, the armor, the weapons, whatever you're going to put in your fantasy story. It should be there for the purposes of the story, not just for flavor or because that's what the genre tropes are and what the genre demands, but you should really use it in a story, right? And so it's okay to have fantasy with no magic and no sorcery. I think that's okay too. So writing mythologies for fantasy races. It's just coming up with new mythology that's like human mythology. Every culture has a belief about where they came from and how they got there and who made them and why and how their traits developed. There's fun kind of Polynesian myths about tattoos and how different every creature is colored because they got a tattoo from the gods, and the rat is gray because he went swimming after he got his tattoo, if I remember that one right. So it blurred all the colors, and so he's not very beautiful at all. The fantasy races in my book are technically human, but early on when magic discovered, they used magic to change themselves to look more animal-like because they viewed animals as avatars of gods. Oh, thank you for the super chat. The super chats are actually showing up on Restream now, so that's cool. Just started watching the stream now. I hope you and the family are doing well. Looking forward to the topic. All the best to you. All right, I appreciate that. Yeah, I was going to do like a music intro stream. Maybe I'll do some music to close it out. Some more live music. I'll delete what I did in the document, do something new here for you guys. Just to do something creative. So yeah, just think about, that's the origin. You have mythologies for how you got there. Like Irish mythology included being settled by like fairy people and gods and stuff. So races will have stuff like that that go into explaining their history. You can be inspired by Tolkien, and Aule made the dwarves. You could do things like that. There's an endless number of things that you can do for background as far as mythologies. But you have to kind of think about how that mythology is going to shape the attitude of the people and their beliefs, because mythology shapes beliefs. If your mythology is something that's like Gnostic, like an evil god made us, imprisoned us in this world, whatever you're going to do for that, then that's going to change the character's attitude about divinity. Did the divinities arise out of chaos like the Olympians? In other words, were they just spontaneously generated and they're not creators of people necessarily? I know that there's some myths about like Zeus making man or something, but they're not infinite, right? What are the gods? Are they more like the Olympians? That's going to affect how the race views itself, as well as what's going on with it. I think mythology is great. I'm super interested in it. I love to deal with mythology, with not just races, but different cultures, fantasy cultures. That I think is a really fascinating thing. The beginning of Bright Children, it begins with a myth. So it starts with a myth about the fall of man and the fall of the gods and the disappearance of light to explain the world that they live in. And I can leave it to the reader as to, is this a myth that's not true, or is it really true, or is it mythologized truth? And you meet a character, eventually you're going to find out in that series what the truth is and how that worked and how they were perverted. And it's basically a reflection of the fall of man, but just with higher level beings, right? Kind of angelic like beings that are closer to the creator. They get tempted to do evil. They get tempted to rebel because they think they're going to get something out of it. All of those are good. Not every religion has like a satanic adversarial character in it, so be aware of that. A lot of times people, when they're making mythologies, because they, in fact, one of the best things to do if you're thinking about mythology is just to go research mythology. Go learn about other cultures' mythologies. The big ones are going to be obviously classical mythology, which is Greek and Roman mythology, Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology, and Mesopotamian mythology. Those are the big ones that are going to shape things that are outside of Christianity. And you'll get a flavor of what they have in common, things like flood myths and beliefs about kind of the descent or fall of man. And you'll find things that are really different about them, mainly their attitude towards the gods. And I would also research religions, because one of the problems that I notice a lot of authors do is they make little iterations of Christianity. And I'm not immune to this. I do this too because I'm a Christian, but people are looking through their Christian lens. We have a post-Protestant culture, so it reflects their post-Protestant mindset. There'll be a Bible. Sorry, most religions don't have Bibles. Okay. The people of the book, the Abrahamic religions, are unique in that they have set texts that are considered to be authoritative, that are bound up and inseparable from tradition and dictate what the religious beliefs of the religion are. There was no such thing. There was no Bible for the ancient Greeks. In fact, all rites were transmitted orally, and also there was a number of secret rites that would exist. Just your family might have its own gods and its own rites. So older religion outside of Christianity is a much more complex affair. So spend some time not just researching those mythologies, but understanding their religion, because that's the other thing that tends to be missing from a lot of modern fantasy, is that the characters are just, they have a post-Protestant mindset towards their own religion, which the ancients would not have had, and which most cultures don't have. The post-Protestant mindset, I have an essay on this that I need to publish that's gonna ruffle some feathers, because labeling something post-Protestant is going to upset Protestants, like it's somehow their fault that it's, that the culture is post-Protestant. But really that it's very separated from the ancient view of religion, that when people start writing religion, they are unable to recognize what religious sentiment actually is. That's what drives a lot of the reaction that we've seen over the last couple of days. That collapse of energy it's almost a religious thing. It's that we have people who are they have a religious sentiment about this entire thing. So like the election going the other way, it's almost like God failing, because they don't have an authentic religion that lets them know that the sun's going to rise tomorrow, for instance. So yeah, research those other religions, see what those rites were. What were the religious rites of other cultures, both ancient and modern, and how would that race, how does it perform its religion? Because mythology abstracted from religion is just kind of a set of stories. That's the big mistake almost every modern thinker, when they start trying to engage with paganism, is that they are just thinking of the mythology and they're not thinking of the rites and the practices of the religion at all. And there's even big accounts that do it. There's like Bronze Age pervert, or there's some LARPing Greek, like Hellenist account. It's like, you don't know jack squat about ancient religions, and you're saying we need to return to these. Do you know what it means to sacrifice to the gods? Do you have any idea what those ancient rites were? Half of them we don't even know anymore. So trying to recover them to like honor the Olympians is nonsense. But even so, they just don't know what they're doing. They just are trying to paste Greek gods onto Christian mythology. Very, very common mistake. If you look at the Rick Riordan books, like the Percy Jackson books, which I've read some of those with my son, he falls into the same trap. Is he just doesn't understand the ancient Greek religion at all, and instead is just kind of sticking the mythological elements into a modern Harry Potter-like story structure. It works for the most part, as long as you don't look too close and you're not expecting anything kind of deep. So that's my advice for figuring out mythologies, is also think about religions and how those relate. How long does it take for you to compose your synth pieces? Well, they're improvised live, so if it's a 20-minute piece, it takes 20 minutes to compose it. So there's no pre-composition. All the stuff on the Zool channel that's numbered is live improv. So it's composed live. For the pre-composed stuff, I'll usually take a day or two to compose it. So for the pre-composed stuff, I usually take a day or two to compose it, and then maybe a little bit longer to record all the parts and kind of clean up the recording and make it work. So yeah, I usually just improvise live. So if it has a number on it, it's a live improv. And if it doesn't have a number on it, then it is a pre-composed piece. Even like the doom metal one, it was all improvised riffs and stuff. So yeah, Hindus have the Bhagavad Gita. Well, that is probably a newer thing. I'm thinking of ancient religions, and believe it or not, most religions still don't have a Bible. There's no Shinto Bible, right? There's actually not a Buddhist Bible. The folk religions of Africa don't have Bibles, right? It's done orally. The ancient religions don't have Bibles. There's the Edda. People are like, the Edda's like the Bible. Sturluson wrote down the Edda, the prose Edda at least, to record the myths because he thought that, record them for posterity. they were transmitted orally, and in some cases through some of the sources with the Poetic Edda and the Völuspá and some of those other original sources. But they weren't like a Bible. They weren't considered authoritative, like how you need to live your life and this is the true word of God. So that's a mistake a lot of people make, is they create a Bible. It's not wrong to create a Bible for your fantasy race, by the way. You can do that, right? You can make them have a Bible, and that's fine. But you should just be aware that most religions don't work that way. Most religions are folk religions, and so they are bound up with the people on the land and the rites that you perform on them, right? On the flip side of the "it's like God failing" attitude on the left you described after Trump made his victory speech, a bunch of people there broke out singing "How Great Thou Art." How old is the Bhagavad Gita? I'm curious. I thought it was like a newer assemblage of texts. No, it's really old. It's really old. It's a synthesis of various strands of Indian religious thought. Okay, so yeah. So it's actually very old. I thought it was because, I don't know, if you're looking at the history of Hinduism, you kind of find out that Hinduism as a concept is somewhat synthesized. And I'm not saying that to offend anyone, but, you know, people have written essays on how, like, the British invented Hinduism. That it's a more diverse set of religious beliefs and lots of different folk religions existing in the Indian subcontinent, and the idea that there's a unified religion known as Hinduism is a rather new thing. Just like how there's no unified paganism. It's the same idea. Lots of different, sometimes harmonious, sometimes syncretic beliefs with different expressions of those, and sometimes competing, diverse, conflicting beliefs with different peoples. Yeah. In my current writing, my only fantasy race is also tied to the world history, religions, and mythology. Dragons that originate in the spiritual world and take one aspect of the human world to manifest. Yeah, that's cool. As a Catholic, how would you feel about a historic fiction using the Christian story, like Lucifer isn't evil who's framed by Gabriel? I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't even touch that, personally. Now, I have one story that kind of has like a fallen angel in it. And even then, I'm like really iffy on like publishing it. You can read some of it on Vela, but like I'll put the whole thing out here at some point, because like I don't want to tread into any waters where what I write as a fiction could be in any way construed as reflecting my actual religious beliefs. So, you know, I'm just a little bit. I wouldn't touch it personally. Whereas if you did this with, like, you know, the Olympians, it's not that big a deal because there's no one who follows that religion. So it's just, you're not going to offend anyone. You don't believe the Olympians are real, so you're not going to offend the gods by writing fan fiction. You know what I mean? I'm interested in superstition for writing stories, heresies arising from different interpretations of the same phenomena. Fantasy worlds often have one monolithic religion. Oh, I totally agree. And mine doesn't do that as much. You go to different countries and they have different rites and different beliefs and different myths. And I think that's a really, really cool way to look at it. Because like I said, paganism was not monolithic. So what tends to happen is people are like, oh, I need a religion for my fantasy world. And it's just Catholicism that they plaster different myths onto. It's like organizationally Catholic, and I actually have an organizationally Catholic thing in the Moonsong books, but it's really like, what if you know, what's the speculation there is like, what if, you know, there was never a Catholic Church, but the culture continued to develop and unify, then you might have a religion that's like this, where there is kind of a sense of a Pontifex Maximus that's overseeing everything, but it's still a little bit more not unified, right? Where do the ideas from the pieces? Is there story, feeling, notes that come to mind? I don't know. It's all improvised, man. Do it live, yeah. A lot of times I think of the title after the fact. I'll have an idea. I usually have the inspiration beforehand of like, okay, sometimes I write out and I have like a chord cycle. I will actually write out a chord cycle. So that'll be the only element of composition before a piece. I'll give you an example. So let me grab my guitar and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So I'll do a chord cycle because my pieces are all about slow change, like things evolving and changing slowly. So as I start, I get more ideas that come up with like, okay, I'm going to do this in, and I'm going to blend this in, and I'm going to transition to more motion, something that's rhythmic, or I'm going to transition into something that lacks rhythm and is more free form and floaty, something textural, something articulate. I try to go through different phases when I'm doing it. And I don't think of a lot of that ahead of time, but I will think of maybe a couple of ideas. Like if I have some chords in mind, I'll usually think of the chords. So I'll just give you an example of the chord cycles that I'm talking about. And you can use these, like you're welcome to. This is not, I do not have like a monopoly on this style of composition here. Where's that cable? I had to buy a blue cable to go with my blue guitar. It's the first cable I've bought in like 20 years or something. Once I learned to repair my own guitar cables, I stopped buying cables. If a cable breaks, I just repair it. I just resolder it, repair the cable, and on with my life. Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, well, I have a lot of experience as a jazz player, and so that tends to inform a lot of what I'm doing. All right, so let me show you with this. Okay, I'm going to turn all of this off. I'm going to turn on the metronome. You can probably hear it in the microphone. Oh, no, that's recording. Alright, so I'm going to do some swells here. I'm missing a nail, a broken nail, so it's going to sound maybe slightly weird. Turn down that Q volume. That is really loud. There we go. Let me come up with, I'm going to do 3 chords. I'm going to do actually D minor. I'm going to do C major. I'm going to do A minor. And then I'm going to do, let's see here, moving down, D, C, A. We can do B minor. No, let's do D major. So we'll be kind of in the key area of G, just to show you what I'm doing here. Let me you might be able to see what I'm doing here. I'll get, here, I'll pull this over here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. All right, so I'm going to record like a little 4-chord thing real quick. We'll do D major, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Oh, I messed it up. I messed that up, so let's do that again. Here we go. All right. And we'll do it again. Start with D major. C major, A minor. These are just triads. We'll close the loop. Then we'll go over to another swell, and I have another track here. This one's kind of a little more distorted, so I'll probably dial off the volume a bit. And what I'll do is I'll come up with chords that are a third away. So as they blend together, the perception of what the chord is will actually change a little bit. So for D, you can go up or down a third, right? So we could go to F sharp, or we could go down a third to B. So I'm going to do B because that's a little bit easier, B minor. And then we'll go C, we'll go up to E. So we'll go B minor, E minor. For A minor, we can go to C, or we can go down to F sharp, like F sharp minor, something like that, or F sharp diminished. But I think it's better to go to C, so we'll go to C. So our chords for part 2 would be B, E, B, E, C, and then I went to B, so we could do D again, or we could do F sharp. We'll just do D again. So it's the same chords in a different order, but as you change them, they end up sounding like major 7 chords as we change it. It gets a little bit weird. So I'll wait for this cycle to repeat, and then I'll record the second cycle. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. E minor. C major. D major. Record that again. That's just not loud enough. And I'm going to do a little bit different tone. 2, 3, 4. I was going to do B. Doesn't matter. And then we can do that again. We can just keep going through that. And so each time we do that, the harmonic flavor changes a little bit. We can balance that off. Play a little solo on top of that. And we'll have a pick here. Where'd they go? I lost all my picks, or I moved them. What was I thinking? And you can make this more complicated too. You can start adding in flat nines, or I'll do a key change sometimes in this pieces. So all I'll do is just write out a sequence of chords that do this. They're always moving a third away. And so by the time I turn off the first one, now we're in a different harmonic area. And we can do yet another set of chords for this one. We could do, since it starts at D, we could do B, C, A, and then D. And it's just change the flavor a little bit, right? B, C, me do A minor. Let's do it. Kind of continue on from there, and then I'm going to change the scale to something else. Change it to, it's in like a C Dorian. We really need like a, it's in a G major-ish area, so that's actually going to be F major. Change it to F major. Turn that up. Mixolydian's really good, right? Whatever you want to do with it, right? So there's the idea. Turn that off. All right. So anyway, that's the idea there. Okay. And yeah, that's the, you know, something I will come up with ahead of time. How I'm going to work through those chords, how they're going to blend together. The song Rain, that was fairly thought out ahead of time, though most of the stuff in it was improvised. It was like, what am I going to do where? Because that was a whole hour. That piece was a whole hour long. So I had to do a little bit more like thinking about it ahead of time, you know. Do you ever find yourself accidentally playing an existing tune? Not usually, but it, you know, it's inevitable because there's only so many melodic combinations. You're going to find something that sounds like something else. On your point with energy, people tend to conserve way too much energy when things are down, like the pandemic or real bad economy. It's natural, but I like to do the opposite. If I feel anxious, that's when I force myself to focus and complete projects. I found it's helped, especially when dealing with anxiety. Yeah, I agree. And like, I think building that it doesn't work interrupty. I found that helps quite a bit, just to feel like that's something you can rely on, is that you're going to be doing. That's just something that you can rely on. Something you can rely on is that you're going to be getting in to do that work. You know. I just looked to see if the Zoroastrians have a holy book, and they do. It's called the Avesta. So I don't know too much about Zoroastrianism. I think there's still Zoroastrians around. I think, if I remember correctly, who am I thinking of? From Queen. Freddie Mercury was a Zoroastrian. I'm going to look it up, though. Yes, Freddie Mercury was a Zoroastrian. A.k.a. Zarathustra was Zoroaster, right? Kind of interesting. Zoroastrianism. I think it's been somewhat like repressed in modern Iran, right? Sorry. All right. You know. There are references to Zoroastrianism in Bohemian Rhapsody. Did they loot all the PS5 Pros yet? Dude, it looks like there's no looting, man. Their energy level is so low, they can't even loot. Oh, look at me. I'm just looking at my face. That's awful. Look at me. I'm just looking at my face. What a frame for that to stick on. What a frame. All right. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to that. Suddenly thought of something. Is it possible to play also Spark the Zarathustra on guitar? Yeah. I have to look it up. Yeah, you could play it. Let me theme. Oh, also Spig Zarathustra. Yeah, you could do it like that. Try to think of it in D instead of C. Which would be the and then the temp. What does the timpani play? A. No. Timpani plays C. Yeah, you could do it. You could do it. Okay. We're starting to run out of time. I'm almost done with Water of Awakening. Is Atalfalda the same nature as Marginal Sanctuary? Yes, and they're both unchanging dimensions separated by the main realm. Yes. Are there 2 more realms if Helga saw 5 moons? There are more realms, right? And so the moons are kind of just I don't even know what to call them, right? They're part of the imaginations of the people who make the realms. So the sorcerers, the dark elven sorcerers who make those realms, they're like made out of the underworld. So they are really like a reflection of their will. So in some cases, it's like a red moon, which is what you see in the underworld in my universe. In some cases, it's other things like that. It's really a reflection of what they see. But thanks for reading my books and for noticing those details. I really appreciate it. And there's more of those in King Leper. In fact, you go back to Martel's library in King Leper. So you get to explore that realm a little bit. Yeah. Most people who listen to metal also listen to jazz and classical music. Many people who listen to jazz and classical music don't like metal. Yeah. Well, I haven't known too many metal guys who like jazz, to be honest. And I think metal's worse for it because we've lost the ability to improvise. We've lost kind of the feeling of, oh, there's a pick. I'm going to tear that. We've lost the feeling of stuff, so lost the feeling. And when we lose the feeling, we start to play canned solos that are kind of like attempts to sound like Paganini, or they're just technical exercises, and that gets kind of boring to me, you know. I wish more metal guys would listen to jazz, but I can't, I can't force that. And it's not like the jazz scene is doing a whole lot of interesting stuff right now anyway. At a certain point, jazz became about preserving the like tropes of jazz and less about improvising. I think Miles Davis had it right. It's like you got to keep pushing forward and doing new stuff. And Herbie Hancock did that as well. But, when Marcellus is like, these guys don't play jazz anymore, I'm like, you're right. Because at a certain point, you run out of copying the tropes of yesteryear. Miles Davis was always interested in doing newer and more interesting stuff, All right. I think I'm about out of time for today. Let me take any other questions. I really appreciate you reading Water of Awakening. It's cool. There's more realms in Needle Ash. They do another one. They go to another one here. And they do it in King Leper. So it's one of the themes of those mainline books. And we've kind of done it in this new one, the Prince of Twilight, that I've been writing live. But that one's more, it's more like Lord Dunsany. It's actually like the Fey realm, which is a little bit different. So the Dark Elves are trying to like preserve the world as they saw it and hide away from the world. And so they create realms of their own will, their own willpower. And they're kind of destined to fail. We kind of get to that in Needle Ash. But it's not, I don't know. I like to play around with those weird ideas. I like the weird themes and the weird ideas. So anyway, let me talk a little bit more about energy. If you have that energy to complete your projects, embrace it. But being able to habitualize the effort will make it so that feeling up or down is not going to stall you out. You're going to keep making progress, because to be honest, nothing feels as good as like finishing. Getting that thing finished and getting it out feels really good. So that's what I'm trying to help people do as much as possible. You get a copy if you join my Patreon. Besides getting Bright Children on Patreon, you're also going to, let me link to Patreon. What the heck is it? You get, you get some free access to the stuff that I write live on the stream, which is cool. And you get a copy of Keys to Prolific Creativity. So there it is. Grab it. You'll get that for free. And this month's free book is Bright Children, which is not available on Amazon. How to get a habit when your work schedule is erratic. Just make it a priority to do it every day. I don't have a set time for when I get to start working, but I will always do what I need to before I go to sleep. So usually if your work schedule is erratic, you have to play it by ear. You have a priority of things you have to get done in a day, and this is how I approach my day. Is like you have to do a workout and you got to do, your creative work. So if you wake up and you have time before work, do them then. And then if the work schedule changes, do it after work. Just make sure you do it every day before you go to sleep. And if eventually you get to where I'm at, where like you habituate it so much that you actually can't sleep unless you've done what you're supposed to. You get like a nervous feeling and an anxious feeling because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. So yeah, just make it a priority to do it every day. You eat every day, right? Regardless of your work schedule. You can sit down at the computer and type for, bust out 250 words every day. There's going to be ways for you to do that. I think I'm going to play a little bit of music to play you guys out, and you guys can just leave whenever you want to. So I'll do that. I don't know. Do you guys want to see the document as I'm working on it, or I'll just put this up here? Because we screwed up the stream trying to play music at the beginning. We'll fix it and play some music at the end. What's kind of cool about this is this is like my pedal board light. So if I need to look down and like see where my pedals are, it's pointing down there. It's kind of cool. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. There we go. All right, so we'll play a little bit to finish this off, and I'll see you guys next time. got to pick. That'll work. All right. Yes, I'll link the Patreon. Let me link the Substack too. I try to write an article every week on the Substack. So I'll link that as well. Make sure you're subscribed to that. And you guys have a great night, okay? Make sure that is off. All right. We'll hear like a click to get this started. Just doing a little drone.